Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to this session of Breakfast in a Book. This happens to be the last session for the spring semester. And it is my pleasure to introduce two of my colleagues and two faculty members from the Department of Developmental Studies this morning. Dr. Arden Hamer is a full professor in the Department of Developmental Studies at IUP. She teaches critical reading, learning strategies, and freshman experience programs. She has co-authored two vocabulary textbooks, which she'll talk about today. One is called Basic College Vocabulary Strategies. The other is Building College Vocabulary Strategies. And she authored these with Darlene Pavis from Westmoreland County Community College. In addition to her work at IUP, Arden facilitates two book discussion groups, one in her community and one at her local library. And both groups have been meeting monthly for over 10 years. Dr. Sally Lipsky is also a full professor in the Department of Developmental Studies. She is the coordinator of IUP's Peer Assistance Program and teaches the course Role of the Peer Educator, Theory, Practice, and Assessment. She is the author of several textbooks, including Introduction to Higher Education, which is published by Pearson, What Every Student Should Know About Reading, published by Allen and Bacon, a training guide for college tutors and peer educators, also published by Pearson, and the textbook that she's going to be sharing with us today, College Study, The Essential Ingredients, also published by Pearson. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Arden Hamer and Dr. Sally Lipsky. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me give Sally the credit. She did all the PowerPoints for us. So I wanted to tell you about my two vocabulary books that I did with Darlene Pavis, Westmoreland County Community College. Without her, there would be nothing, and so that's why she's always listed first, even though it's not alphabetical. She was the one that had the idea, that had the dream, that contacted the sales rep, that contacted the publisher. So without her, nothing would have happened. So if you want to move to we're on our third edition of both of these. The third edition's out now. We just about have the instructor's manual finished, and it's going to be put up on the Pearson website. And this should be, I don't think this will be in the classrooms until September. So they're marketing it now. Sally and I were pleased. We looked at, for this presentation, we looked at the number of copies sold. And I was pretty happy to discover that it's fairly high, more than I had anticipated. So the covers are always interesting. We brought all of our books. So this is, the Marbles was the first edition, and it was like a strategic idea. The second edition was the hot air balloons, and I think that was because you were soaring. I don't know. And so now we have hang gliders. So I don't know why, but that the publisher takes care of that. There's absolutely nothing that I have to do with that. There's tons of vocabulary books. I mean, you can go to any publisher and there are tons of vocabulary books. So the question is, what makes our book different and I think better? Okay. And if you want to go to the next slide. One thing that we work on is that our goal is that the reader does not have to stop what they're doing, stop their comprehension, and go to the dictionary. So the book works its way through a strategy, which is see and say the word. So if you look at the word, if you try to pronounce it, because oftentimes our speaking vocabulary is larger than our reading vocabulary. So if you can say the word, you might understand it. The second point is the structural analysis, and so our book works with prefixes, suffixes, root words, and then we build from there. So hopefully by the end of the textbook, the students will recognize a variety of structures, and that'll give them a head start. And then context clues. Oftentimes the writer will put in the sentence what the word means, and so if you're aware of context clues and you're looking for context clues, you can just keep on going. And if all else fails and the word seems to be really important, you have to go to the dictionary. And so that's the last step. And then when we'll show you in a minute, when we introduce the word, we follow through those 4 steps, and then hopefully that'll just become second nature to the student as they're reading. The book is aimed at community college students. We had nothing to do with the titles. Initially in the first edition, which I believe was published in 2005, they were paired with 2 of Pearson's popular reading books, which was Basic College Reading Strategies and Building College Reading Strategies. So our book was marketed with those 2 reading books, and so the initial word selection was from those books. We expanded obviously on that, but at least in each one of our chapters there were words that coordinated with that textbook. Since then that book it's still being used, it's still being sold. They have not done a new edition, and we've gone off on our own. So next. Okay. So these are some of the features that we think make our textbook different and better than other textbooks. Many times in a reading course, there's so much to do that there's not a lot of time to talk about learning. And not all students have a chance to take a learning strategies course. So we have incorporated memory strategies and learning strategies in the textbook. And basically they're aimed at vocabulary, but we're always working on transfer. We're always suggesting that you can take these strategies that you're using for vocabulary and apply them to your other classes. So we have varied learning strategies for vocabulary. The chapters are designed to maximize the learning. In this 3rd edition, we rearranged some things to make it, at least in our minds, more logical and to follow a sequence of literal learning all the way up to application. We have power words, and I should say in the chapters, the words are presented according to word parts. So there will be several, there'll be maybe prefixes, and there'll be several words that begin with the same prefix, or several words that have the same root word. But at the end, we have a couple power words in each chapter that are interesting words, they're great words, they're popular words right now, like egregious, ubiquitous, that don't fit anywhere in any of our word parts, but they're used a lot in just everyday reading. So the power words let us put in some words that are interesting and that we thought the students should know. We have chapter reviews, we have exercises that a little bit go beyond what we've done. We have a puzzle. Darlene loves crossword puzzles, so she did all the crossword puzzles. And I can tell you they're a real bear when you're in the publishing process because the boxes kept changing. The puzzles drove me nuts, but everybody likes the puzzles. And then of course we have these memory principles in each chapter. Sally, if you want to go to the next one. Okay. So this is in each of the books, and again, this is also quite different than other vocabulary books. Our first chapter deals with learning and not vocabulary. There's no words in the first chapter. I should have said the basic is aimed at about maybe 10 and 11th grade reading level. The building is maybe 12th grade freshman reading level. So in chapter 1, building is more sophisticated. There's more detailed information about the memory process, about the learning process. In each of the books, however, we define learning as requiring varied and repeated exposure to information spaced out over time. I teach here DVST 160 learning strategies, and that's the same definition that we use for learning. And then everything that we do is geared toward that. I'm sure Mr. Faust is working on, spaced out over time, do a bunch of different things. And so that's what we use as the basis for the book, and that definition is reinforced through all the activities that we do. These are basic 7 steps to memory that you can read. Again, no, nothing new here. We all know it, but sometimes we need to be reminded of this. The seventh one, study before bed, is not necessarily scientifically proven, but if you review something and then go to sleep, we do know that sleep gives us the information time to get secure and consolidated in your memory. So, but in the following chapters, then each chapter we work with one of those 7 steps to memory, and then in the further chapters we go beyond that. At the bottom, in both books, the chapters follow the same format, the same pattern. There's some kind of a quotation dealing with language, dealing with words, dealing with the enjoyment of language. There's a memory tip, a learning strategy, and then there's 2 parts. We present the words in groups of 7 to 9. And again, in learning, if you've heard this in your psychology class, your working memory can only deal with 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information at once. So there's no use presenting 15 or 20 words because it's too many. So we do 7 to 9, and they're presented in what I said before, see and say, structural elements, context clues, and the dictionary. And the student goes through each one of those steps to figure out the meaning of the word. And then there's practice exercises. We start with multiple choice because that's the easiest, and it's pretty. The answer, I think, is pretty clear. Then fill in the blank, which you're familiar with. Correct or incorrect. The words used in a sentence, sometimes the sentence is correct with the word, sometimes it's incorrect. The student then has to be able to identify that and then fix it. And when it's incorrect, rewrite the sentence to make it correct. And then the last one's the short answer. The short answer is the one the students like the least because it requires the most thinking. So the multiple choice is pretty easy. They just pick an answer. But the short answer asks them to apply the definition of the word to something else, to something that they are familiar with, in their own lives. So it takes a little bit more thinking. But you can see the progression as far as the learning, from very literal down, all the way then to applying it to a new situation. The next thing, and so, though, this right here, is for part A, and then the whole format's repeated for part B with, again, 7 to 9 words, different words. Okay. Then we have the power words, usually 3 or 4 per chapter. The exercises for the power words are the same as the short answer. It's an application. And then in the chapter review, there's different things that students can do to extend their learning. In basic, again, because that's at a slightly lower level, there's a few more exercises in the extend your learning area. In both books, in extend your learning, we give learning strategies that are varied. Some that use a visual strategy, some that use an auditory strategy, some that use large and small muscle movements. In one of the books, we have different strategies. I'm pretty sure it's in basic. But in building, we have different strategies at the end of each chapter. In basic, again, it's a lower level book, so in basic, the exercises are the same so that the students know what to expect. The one thing we added at the second edition was the expanded word forms, and I'm going to show you an example of that in a couple of minutes. But what we discovered was even though the student had memorized the definition of the word, they couldn't use it. They could use it in that particular format, but they really didn't know the word well enough that they could use it with a different ending, an ED ending or an ING ending. They only knew the definition of the base word. So we added this expanded word forms, again, which sort of helps the student become able to use that word. They own it a little bit more. And then there's always the Darlene's puzzle fun at the end. So, and I do those puzzles over and over again to make sure they're right. So here's an example. This is demoralize, and I'm pretty sure it's from building. With the DE, so see and say the word. There's the word. There's the pronunciation, and there's a pronunciation key in the beginning of the inside the front cover in both books. And then the prefix DE means down, apart, or away. And then there's the context clue, so that you could, the idea that his failing grade, as a result of that, he quit school and gave up his dream, he's demoralized. So you could get the idea that that was a bad and negative thing. And then here's the dictionary meaning. Okay. Again, we present another sentence with context clues. And again, what we added for the second edition was synonyms. So again, we're working on expanding the students' vocabulary, again, so there's words that mean the same. And then in the third edition, we added antonyms, words that mean the opposite. Okay. So then we're going to move on. These are what the exercises look like. Okay. So the multiple choice, you have to decide in which of those situations would somebody feel demoralized. My favorite multiple choice question was, I would say, what would somebody say if they were demoralized? Great job, I quit, I give up, let me help you. So those were my favorite ones to write, and we tried to make it interesting to the students so that they would, be entertained slightly as they're doing this. Fill in the blank, again, you can see that one. The correct or incorrect, this one obviously would be incorrect because the student would not have been demoralized if she received an A on the exam. So you could change that to say she was demoralized when she earned an F on her physics exam. Or you could change the word demoralized to exhilarated. So there's multiple ways that you can change that sentence. And then here's an example of the expanded word forms. We use demoralized, demoralizing, and demoralized to make sure that the students can, use those correctly. So what I wanted, before we move on to Sally, there's a couple of different things that I thought were interesting. And, I sort of alluded to, what makes our book different. One is the inclusion of the memory and the learning strategies. The second thing is the smaller number of words. 7 to 9 words are worked, are introduced and used at a time. And then as you move forward, you expand that. So there's only between 150 and 180 words per book, which, seems like maybe not a lot. One point is that through learning the word parts, students are expanding their working vocabulary. The other thing is, why present them with 300 words in a book if that's too many to handle? So, we think that with these number of chapters and these number of words, students could get through the entire book in a semester. They're not going to get to chapter 12 and then quit. They're going to be able to complete the book. In the instructor's manual, we have, for each chapter, there's 3 10-point quizzes. So the instructor then can choose, and this is a new thing in the third edition. In the previous ones, we made chapter tests, we made unit tests, we made midterm. We just wrote test after test. In this case, the instructor can put together whatever they want. The instructor's manual's on the Pearson website. They can cut and paste, and they can make a 10-point quiz, a 20-point, 30-point. It's very flexible for them. So that was a big difference in the third edition. A major thing we did in the third edition was to reorganize the exercises. And again, we should have done this in edition 1, but we didn't. The multiple choice needs to be first because it was the easiest and the most interesting. And then we put the multiple choice answers in the back of the book so the student could do the multiple choice, check themselves, and then move on. So, and we tightened the words a little bit. As I said in the beginning, we were sort of confined to words that would go along with the 2 reading books. Now we're on our own, so now we were able to move words around and go with a more logical flow that we really felt was better. And then the other thing that I think is interesting about my situation was that I had a co-author who lives an hour away from me. And we just have still a ball. we met at a fluke, at a statewide conference. And actually, I'd been looking at the Westmoreland County Community College brochure, wanting her job. I would say, who is this Pavis person and when are they going to retire? Well, then I met her. She's younger than me, so that wasn't going to happen. And I can't tell you how it just sort of evolved. It just sort of happened. But at one of the conferences they had a session that was about different personality tests, and Darlene and I are completely opposite. There's completely opposite. And I think that's why we've never had a disagreement. We just work so well together. We divide up the tasks. It has been wonderful. We've really had a great time with it. Again, this has been a nice opportunity because Sally and I were talking that we got to reflect back. I've been working on these vocabulary books for 10 years. The first edition was published in 2005, so the lead-in time is long. So it's been 10 years that I've been working with Darlene on this, and it's been wonderful. It has been a fantastic experience. So I've enjoyed every minute of it. So I'm going to pass this on to Sally, and I get I'm allowed to jump in because I use Sally's book in
actually,
my
she
classes.
should be talking more than I because I have never used this edition of the book. It came out, it's like a car. It comes out earlier the year is 2013, but it actually came out so that students have used it starting in fall semester 2012, as some students in our audience have used it. And Arden actually uses it, teaches a course that uses it, this textbook. There's been 3 editions. I brought all 3 just so you could see. It's the cooking theme, which goes, since I love food, but a key to it, this is the first one in 2004. So I looked back, 2001, so it's 12 years that I've been working with a publisher to get these books in different editions. And it is the essential ingredients of college study because the purpose of, really the important thing about the books is they are streamlined and they are intended from 1 and 2 credit college level learning strategies, either community college or 4-year college. Most of the books previous to this were large and expensive, more expensive, and that was the other thing, to a moderate price. I wanted something. So this is the first edition, and it was right around the cooking theme came up on TV shows. There's actually a cooking college in Michigan, a chef college, a cooking college that uses this also, which I think is pretty neat. This is the 2nd edition in 2008, spices, and this is the 3rd edition in 2013. And this edition actually just won, I'll show you this, the formatting and everything, won an award at the 2013 New York Book Guild Club annual show, which is pretty neat. Okay, so as I said, it is intended for students in a 1 or 2. So it is something that I wanted to do that makes it very readable, interactive, so students are actually doing exercises and make students go through the process of learning and how to change and modify so that they come up with something that's successful that they can use in a variety of content area courses. We look at in the book the behaviors, what you do for successful, the attitude, and then also some modalities, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, what are your preferences, how can you mangle and mix different strategies. And the ultimate goal is that application. So they become more self-regulating and independent learners. Okay, next. This is just the content, so basic table of contents. It shows you the coverage of it, and it's a pretty typical range of topics for any learning strategies course.
Although I like chapter 3, the title is a new title, Maximizing Your Productivity. I thought that was a great title because that's what, the chapter's about how can you be more productive. So that was one change that I really liked. Okay?
Okay. I put in some features that make it, as I said, be more engaging and interactive and also reflective, because it's very important that students think about and process some of the concepts. And these examples in the yellow box are all from Chapter 2 on time management. And the first one is one of the pause and reflect exercises, and it has to do with procrastination, which is a major theme and topic. Where students do writing exercises, and then the instructor can use this for class discussion, small group work. Throughout each chapter are actual quotes from students. I did focus groups in each of the versions of it and came up with some examples of how students apply and use whatever the topic is. Okay, next. Well, you have to try it out. That's the key there. You've got to try it out and apply it, and whatever they're doing. This one here is they went through some strategies to overcome procrastination, and that's where they have to, in a contained amount of time, usually a week, try something. And then whenever they try it out, of course, when you're finished, it's an evaluation. So it is, did it work, not work, what happened? How can you adapt and make changes, revise? Edition 2, that was one of the, for each edition, they send it out to professionals in the field and say, what do you think, what do you want? And one of the things is more critical thinking, problem solving, so we actually have a little icon that in the textbook, that we want some higher level thinking about it. What, why, how. And more so in the third edition is a lot more online coursework, technology, information in it. And again, there's a section on procrastination and taking online courses, which is a major. Okay, next. And each chapter ends with, as sort of a summary, is come up with something that you will do in regards to that topic. And the format of the 5 questions, I will, and the goal is to make goal setting very specific, very realistic, which is a challenge for many entering college students in particular. To identify hurdles, how they will eliminate it, a specific time plan, and reward, intrinsic or extrinsic reward. And then there are a lot of various problem-solving scenarios that, again, come from looking at students. What are some typical situations?
Can I jump in?
Please do.
I teach this class mostly in the spring semester to a distinct population, not all, but most of the students that take this class, this 160, DVST 160, using this book. Most of them are on probation. Again, not all of them. There's some that are self-selected, but many are on probation. And the goal setting is really an important thing. The personal action statement, at least for the first half of when we meet, I do that all the time. And that is one thing that makes a big difference. And what's important, the way Sally organized it, is not just, well, I'm going to do this. If you follow this scenario, you have to think about, why is it going to be difficult? What kind of obstacles are going to be in my path, and how am I going to overcome those to achieve this success? So that, those steps 2 and 3 are critical, I think, when you're working with a population that needs to make some major changes in their lifestyle and their study life.
Yes, behavior modification principles. Okay, next. Just real quickly, what makes 3 edition? As I said, the first one was really The success was working with a publisher, and then the next slide will tell you the publishing process, but for a 1 or 2 credit course, very reader friendly, and that's a lot of the feedback that we got from students is they actually read it. Okay, it was able to read it. Each edition, of course, there has to be enough sales to warrant a revision. The revision process is not, it's probably a 2-year process to do it. It's major work. It really is. And then some of the things that at that point they were adding a companion website for the textbooks. Some of the textbooks at Pearson had companion website material. And then, of course, the 3rd edition is the major one's more technology and online updates, and the Pearson has an online lab that it was linked to, and chapter PowerPoint questions. I had to do clicker questions for each chapter as supplement to instructor resources. Okay, and then we're both going to talk about the last slide here is the publishing process. I try to make a 10-step, it's not for everyone, but we both started, certainly I did with the sales representative talking. I was at this point using my own material for teaching the learning strategies. And if the sales representative say, well, we might be interested in that, let me link you up with. You always have to do some kind of prospectus. And you have to describe it, and as I put important, comparison, they want to market, they're in to make business, the publishers. So you have to have why would somebody buy this text? You have to put in comparison with competing, sometimes sample chapter or 2 are required. Then if they're interested, they'll discuss with the appropriate editor, usually to reviewers. It will go out to reviewers, to the reviewers, the other professionals. In my case, it's blind. You don't know who is, but you get the comments back. And it was a combination of 2-year, 4-year professionals. And if you get the contract, number 6, you just start writing. Hey, the summers, that's where the summers come in. That's really important.
And there's usually a deadline.
Oh, yes.
The communication part is really difficult because nobody meets face-to-face anymore. So it's conference calls, it's by email. Maybe at a conference the editor might be there and you would meet with the editor. But I sort of felt I was on my own. We had meetings with the editor, we signed the contract, and then nothing. I was just working away, and they assumed I was working on target, and Darlene was working on target. We always had a deadline, and of course we know I made my deadline a week early. I never worked down to the wire. It makes me too nervous. But I don't know if you felt the same way, but there was minimal in the writing time.
It depends on the editor too. I would see the editor face to face at conferences, the national conferences that we would be going to. I really liked the editor that started on these. She has since left, but we had good communications, and occasionally she would call. I would call her, or emails. But they do assume you are self-regulating learners and writers. So
you're on your own to get that timeline.
Yeah, it takes a lot. Okay. And there is a production team. Usually, first they start with an editorial person that will go through and make all kinds of changes, and they send it back to you. And I mean, that was the interesting thing is even when you turn in the manuscript, you're not done. It is a lot of back and forth. And then when it goes to the design team, again, a lot of back and forth, and they will send it to you for final revision. It's amazing how many mistakes you pick up, or not.
Or not.
Yes, which is embarrassing when you don't pick them up. But among the people that are working with it, you're always given the final draft to revise.
And I thought,
go ahead.
This third, it's interesting to look at the manuscript process over, at least for me, the 10 years. This last one came back on Adobe Reader, and so I had to learn all that, putting in these little sticky notes and lining things out with red and all that. But I thought that this was the smoothest. In the past, it's been a little difficult. It's so hard because, especially in my case, Darlene, I'm the email, I'm the contact person, and so Darlene would send me her changes, And I'd have to make sure I incorporated her changes in whatever I thought was the master document and then get that sent off. And at least the second and third edition, the production team that I worked with was in India. But this last time, again, I never talked to anybody on the phone. It was all through email. So, but it was very smooth. I was really pleased. The third time around was much, maybe I was more experienced, but it was very smooth this time.
And they also, had us do a very extensive marketing questionnaire from our point of view, so that they can, because in their sales meetings, they want to be able to tell the sales representatives what they should tell as they go from school to college, the appropriate people about the book.
It's like next to impossible to get a professor to switch books. Because they like what they have, they're used to it, and so to make a complete change is very difficult. So you really have to have some good selling points.
And even when you think it's all done, you get even the book. This is number 10. It's just amazing that you think you're all done and how much work can go into an instructor's manual, PowerPoint, a test bank, web guides. And you usually have, after the manuscript is actually done and going into production, about 6 months before it comes out to get all of this, and that's where procrastination and time management.
Yeah, we sent in, I was looking back at my notes, we sent in the final copy for Basic and Building 3. We did that about October and November. And right now we're finishing up the instructor's manual. But again, I worked ahead over the summer, or I would have never made my deadline for the instructor's manual. I did all of the exercises, all the answers, the tests and the answers, and I would have never made the deadline if I hadn't worked really far ahead. So, yeah, you must be self-directed.
And are there any questions?
Any questions?
I have some questions. First of all, I'm really interested in the third edition of your book that they put that thing in about online learning, and I know Portia will be interested in this too because she has a real interest in online classes, and there's a huge push right now at our university and other universities for these online courses. But what people don't tell the students is that it does take a self-directed learner to take these courses, and unfortunately it seems as though that's not the type of learner that is taking those courses. So how did that come about? How did that portion of the book come about? Is that something you thought about or something that the publisher was pushing for?
Well, I think it was both. I knew, when we looked at the third edition, I have to. I have to add some more information on online and technology. By the way, there's a 50% failure rate for undergraduate courses online. Yes. And you're absolutely right. Many of the students take online because they think it's something they want to get out of the way. They don't feel like, for the wrong reasons.
And they think it's going to be easier when in fact it is not.
Harder.
It's not easier for the student.
Absolutely.
It's not easier for the instructor. When you think about the instructor, if a student asks a question via email in a classroom setting, they would ask that question and everybody in the class would hear the answer. So anybody who was afraid to ask that question or was also wondering wouldn't have that benefit. So the instructor may have to answer the same question 20 times, and the students are not getting the benefits of hearing that answer in the classroom. So that's just one example, but yeah, I think it's wonderful that you've included that in this edition.
Yes, and the interesting thing is about online is they're starting to step backwards, many of the colleges, because hybrid courses are increasing. That's a combination of face-to-face and purely online, because they're realizing for undergraduates, especially lower level undergraduates, that purely online is not necessarily the way to go.
That's how I've been teaching my classes most of the time, because it would make my life easier to actually be online, because then I don't have to travel so much to the branches. But I've always felt that it's necessary as part of getting them in track for if they do decide to take an online class, that I do a mixed hybrid course there, and they're introduced to D2L, they work assignments in there. And Kelly's right in that it does take a lot of time, and you might not get that interaction, but if you do set it up in a way in discussions, online discussions, it does actually work even better than if they were just sitting in a class and not attentive, because they have to go into it. But it's all on the instructor to develop these communities online.
Yes.
And that's a whole other book.
Yes.
Yeah,
Writing
well,
about, training for
Yeah.
online teaching.
yes. And there actually are study strategies books just devoted to online courses. They have some
And
ones
there's a
out
whole issue of if you study adult learners, at what point is a student an adult learner? And most of the research says they don't even hit that until maybe 24, 25 years of age. So you've got all these undergraduate students that are not at that level yet to be that, self-regulated or self-directed learner. And so you've got a very difficult task when you have those students in your classroom trying to teach them those skills, because some of them are simply not mature enough yet in their learning. And so I applaud you both for that.
But they are in classes, content classes, where that instructor, where the professor expects them
Right.
to be, doesn't give a second thought to the fact that they are independent, they are adults, and they will do it.
Right.
I have a question. Advice, I think. What would your advice be? Because I'm looking when I teach information literacy, I constantly look for a good information literacy library research type of textbook. And I've been doing this, I'm 13 years here, and I have not found, the one that I found this year was probably the closest to the best one I could use for my audience, which is The Elements of Library Research. It's thin, it's 5 chapters, it's like what you're talking about, that it actually is readable. The rest of them that I find are on the level of creating librarians. They're big snorers, they have tons of jargon, and I actually myself have outlined my course in a way that it is almost a textbook. But I'm chicken to try to go find somebody to publish this.
Okay, I was just going to say, you are on, that is exactly
Yeah.
why I started this. Exactly, and so I would, if the sales representatives come around, do they see, I don't know which publisher or publishers are, do you see a sales representative that you can show, this is what I have, that can direct you to?
I haven't really sought any. First of all, I'm deep in my dissertation, so I feel guilty writing anything else that demands my time. But like you said, when I look at my course material, I keep saying to myself, why do I keep going out trying to use somebody else's when mine is what I really want and geared for my class,
So I would encourage you to, and usually, the publishers would have, for public prospective publishers on their website, they will have information about how to, put in a manuscript, the process, but also conferences. Bring it with you to professional conferences and show the publishers what you have and say who is interested, who's the contact person.
And look at some of the books that you did not think were appropriate. Look to see who published those and then market them. Because, you can say the book that I'm using is not for my population. Here's this population. Because they may not already have, I wouldn't market to the publisher who's done the smaller book that you're currently using. I'd market to a different publisher.
Good idea.
But you could start now, it takes years. You could put your prospectus together, start to send it out, finish your dissertation, and then you have something else to jump into right
I
away.
actually have a prospectus because the class that I took in my doctoral class with Dr. Mary DeLongo, that was one of our assignments, was to create a prospectus to give to
You are ready.
Yeah, so
You are ready.
I'm just chicken right now to put it
No.
out there.
You have nothing to lose. You're going to send it out, and if nobody picks it up, nobody else will know. And then you can move on to the self-publishing. You have nothing to lose.
That's
So,
right.
and I've had a ball with this. It's been agonizing at times. and
Yes, it's frustrating
hair
at
pulling,
times.
I had a different experience than Sally because I had a co-author, so it wasn't all on me. So, but I've just had it's been wonderful. So I'd say go, what if you had nothing to lose? So I'd go for it.
I have a question and a comment about your books as well, Arden. Do you know if any of the high schools have been picking up your book for use in SAT practice, things
I
like
don't
that?
think so. I don't think they've been marketed there.
Okay. Because
So-
I know, I taught high school English, and the vocabulary books that we used, the idea that you had of just limiting to the 7 to 9 words, oh, bless you for that. Because
Yeah.
we would use these vocabulary books, it was 30 words every time. And it was nothing but rote memorization.
Exactly.
You know, even though
they
they had those activities in there, you cannot master 30 words
Right.
in a week. It's
Yeah.
impossible. So you might want to think about that too, is doing something like that for the public school area, because that's something that at least I know when I taught English was not available. It was jam as many vocabulary words down their throats as you can.
So what you have to do, Arden, instead of just take out new cover, basic,
vocabulary strategies.
Absolutely.
and
And cater
tell-
to that, just
and tell
maybe
Pearson that
maybe
they need
more
to-
of a 9th, 10th grade level, or
Okay.
8th, 9th, 10th grade level, because I'm telling you, that's what they need. And
Okay.
unfortunately, in public schools, it's a lot of, get as much into them as you can before they take their tests, their assessment tests. But they don't understand, look, they're not gonna learn this. It doesn't matter, how many times you go over it. If it's too much information, nobody takes that in. So yeah, that's just a
Good.
suggestion.
Well, I needed another project.
Yeah.
Because my part of the instructor's manual's all done,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I need someplace to go next, so,
There you go.
okay.
Any other questions, comments? Right. Well, thank you both so much. We really
Thank
enjoyed the
you.
Thank
presentation.
you.
And everybody enjoy some refreshments before you leave. Take some things
And
with
thank you for coming. We'll be sure to report back.